Last time Amos tried to interview me, I made sure I turned up the reggae music very loudly in the house, if you remember that occasion.
Okay. Okay. So, we are with Mr. Ivor Greenstreet.
Yes. Cobner Greenstreet.
Cobner Greenstreet.
Yes, Tuesday born.
Lawyer in Accra.
Lawyer and publisher.
Publisher. So you should have some interest, natural interest in property rights.
For sure.
Yes.
Everybody in business has an interest in property rights.
But I guess you are especially pleased because you are both a lawyer and a publisher.
Yes, but in today's economy, it's not only publishers who have problems with exercising property rights or having property rights problems. All industries have problems of that nature, particularly in a developing country. But we are signatories to so many international agreements that attempt to secure those rights on behalf of both publishers and people in other areas. But progress is still to be made to make those rights effective.
Yes, I believe you are. I know you are at the concert on the 8th of April where Ivor Taylor played. Now, this is a gentleman who's been in high life music for about 50 years, made mainly big hits. Would you expect him to be rich, given what you know about our situation?
Certainly not. The quality of his work, one would have thought over a period of time would have ensured that he would be a very wealthy person, similar to many stars you find across the world, whether in Europe or in America. But unfortunately, there's very little protection for musicians who produce music in Africa or West Africa. And I think Ivor Taylor is one of those very people who unfortunately has been subjected to the fact that, despite the excellence of his work, he has not received the reward that he ought to have received over that period of time.
My understanding is that the regime for protecting rights has improved dramatically over the last 10 years or so. Am I right?
Certainly.
But is it just a matter of the omnibus law or operationally?
Well, the mere fact that it's improved over the last 10 years certainly will not be any solace to someone like Ivor Taylor, because he's been in business for so many years, and the problems that he faces will be as a consequence of things that took place 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago when he was at his prime. So the only way is forward. Certainly we hope we can't go any further backward than we were before in terms of protection of those rights. But there has been improvement, yes, and that improvement is reflected in the types of works that you see so many musicians producing today, and the fact that they are able to generate income, which before they were not able to do.
Let's talk more generally. You are in publishing as well. What do you think is our national attitude to services?
Very poor. I think it's reflected in the fact that probably services accounts for only about 30% of our output. And in the modern economy, at least certainly from my opinion, if we are to try and move forward, we need to be looking in the direction of something that we've discussed many times, which is the weightless economy, or the knowledge-based economy, which means that really our service sector ought to be about at least 70% of our output, in the sense that you generate far more income for your economy and have to produce far less. And in terms of our position and in terms of the qualities that we have as a country, from the perspective of financial services or banking or health services or computer data or processing, there's so much we can do. I mean, India as a developing country, I think, has an offshore software center that produces about $2 billion a year in revenue and 260,000 jobs. So certainly we need to really concentrate our efforts in that direction. But it's not just purely the private sector. Government has to do quite a bit in the area of certain fixed costs and put certain fundamental infrastructure in place to at least create the foundation for people to attempt liftoff in that area. So we have a poor attitude to services, but I think that is also something that has improved in the last 10 years. And but there is great room for further improvement.
Okay.
I mean, look at a Nike shoe or a Nokia phone. The value in a Nike shoe doesn't come from the content of the material, but it comes from the culture associated with the shoe. Yeah, I mean, however many times you look at an image doesn't reduce the value of it. And so we have so much value, here in music and in media and in so many different areas that we need to start concentrating on it, both in terms of what we have locally, in terms of what we can assist with regionally, and also what we can offer internationally in terms of being a base for so many organizations who might want to utilize, the fact the English language is well spoken here, the fact that we have the necessary infrastructure for so many operations to establish here. But the importance is a greater attention to detail, a greater desire for self-dependency, the development of a strategic plan which everybody agrees upon, and actually implementing it. But I think we tend to be quite haphazard in our approach to things, and that needs to change.
Actually, you've almost answered the second question I was going to ask. I'll still ask it. I mean, you said in the last 10 years, you've made some positive moves. And I was going to ask again whether you think at operational level, what sort of gaps we have to fill. You've already begun your response, the latter part of the response. You were getting to that already. But would you want to expand on that?
Well, I mean, you are here interviewing me today, and I'm very surprised that it being a Saturday, the light hasn't gone off. Normally, light goes off on a Saturday, without warning. And we also discussed earlier the problems with surges in electricity, and so there's some basic infrastructural things that need to be in place and that need to be consistent, and that need to be affordable. I think our electricity and water is quite expensive, in comparison, and our telephone is also very expensive. So these are the things that need to be identified. But the important thing is that the sector as a whole and those who are involved in it, instead of having an adversarial relationship with government, there should be one of cooperation where they come together and sit down and devise a plan which is acceptable to both sides and which is workable, to both sides, and that it's implemented. Because even a weightless economy, the mere fact that we're talking about it means that we're already quite, far behind. The mere fact that we're even talking about GDP, wanting to achieve a GDP, I think, of $1,000 in 2015. By that time, GDP of $1,000, will be still rendered as, as part of a low-income country. So it is the speed, at which we do these things. I mean, Singapore and so many other countries in that region and elsewhere are doing so much in the health sector. I mean, and they invite corporations over, and they have corporate finance specialists who sit down, know the businesses of the people who they're dealing with, and establish things in such a way to make the whole effort that they're trying to achieve take place. But we are still, I think, very much ceremonial in our attitude and not workmanlike in our attitude. And those are the fundamental things that, from my perspective, have to change.
I know you've worked in other African countries, service sector, especially in publishing. How do we compare to our West African neighbors?
Oh, we are far ahead. That I have to say without wanting to appear nationalistic. And certainly I don't have any prejudice or bias in favor of Ghana. But if you compare Ghana to whether it's Burkina, Togo, Mali, Nigeria, Ivory Coast, I mean, I would say that Ghana is streets ahead. And we have to take advantage of the fact that we have that gap, and seize it as an opportunity and build upon it. I don't see that aggression in existence now. We're in a global economy. We're not in the sort of world order of the 1970s whereby we have to complain about the international order and say that we find it problematic. Rather, we have to see where our strengths lie and decide that that's where our strengths lie and aggressively pursue it in that, globalized, environment in which we exist. I don't think we're doing that at the moment. I mean, I think in 1960 or something, If you look at per capita income, Ghana was about, I think, 110 or 190. South Korea was 110. Now Ghana is, 340, and South Korea is something like 8,000. And if you examine that, in perspective with, in asking the question, why is that the case? And you look at gross, capital formulation as a percentage of GDP, you'll see that in 1960 we had something like, I'd say, 25%. They had something like 10%. By 1970, we had something like 10%, and they had 25%. By 1983, they had 30%, and we were down to 4%. And right now, the 24% that we have is mainly donor-driven. It's not driven by national savings mobilization. It's not driven by greater and efficient taxation or an outreach of greater taxation and collection of tax. So unless we examine that and why that is the case and what we're going to do to correct that anomaly, then 5 years will pass, and this weightless economy is a dynamic economy. It changes fast. It changes overnight. Radio. It took radio, I think, 40 years for radio to get something like 50 million users. It took internet 4 years to get 50 million users. So within 4 years, everything would have changed. So we can't just sit down and start formulating plans now, which others are formulating, and they will seize the initiative. And by the time that we're ready with our plan, the initiative it would have been lost. So we really need to be very, very aggressive, and otherwise we'll fail.
I know you also, through also context, quite conversant with the new economies in Ghana, like the software industry and so on and so forth. Now, you spoke about adversarial relationships in this weightless economy.
Yes.
Would you want to comment on, let's say, first of all, what do you think about the quality of the relationship between government and this new economy?
Yes. When I say
the relationships within the new economy.
Yes. When I say adversarial, you can be adversarial by inaction.
Okay.
You can be adversarial by omission. And when I say adversarial, I don't mean that there's an onslaught or there's an attack or there's a specific agenda to prevent the software operations or computer data processes to succeed, but merely by inaction and merely by lip service. It's a form of an adversarial relationship, because there then becomes a dichotomy between what you say that you claim to stand for and what you are actually doing on the ground. And so that's what I meant to say. I'm not saying that people are sitting down to say that, okay, let's destroy all software operate. No, I don't think that's the case. But there needs to be greater interaction in terms of detail, less of the seminars, of the conferences, but more to sit down, behind closed doors and say, right, what is the plan? What is the agenda, week by week, day by day, month by month, step by step? How is it being implemented? Who's implementing it? Why isn't it being implemented? When is it going to be implemented? And, heads should roll.
Yeah. Now I want to end on music. I'm quite impressed. You're really into the contemporary music. Now the big question, I guess, in Ghana now is, why are we not making money internationally on our own music? And especially perhaps, is there any prospect of the dominant popular music in Ghana today making it international?
That's a very difficult and complex question, because it you were then talking about a business model. You're not necessarily talking about the quality of the music, because that clearly is not in contention. You're talking about...
Could be in contention in some people's eyes.
Well, certainly, yes, in some people's eyes. But I mean, even in the African market abroad is quite huge now. I mean, Malian music, there's some Malian stars who are who are doing very well, and so it depends on the perspective one takes in terms of looking at it, whether it's a business model, whether it's a marketing model, or whether it's the legal rights that are attached to the production of these musics, and that solving that problem is the key to the question as to whether they will succeed or not. But they're aggressive and they're intelligent, and I believe that they will find a way. Musicians always find a way to make themselves heard and succeed.
You're hopeful.
Very hopeful.
Good. Thanks a lot, Ivor.
Okay.